I'll never forget the sight of Chief Amadi lying under the palm tree, his agbada soaked with blood. His chest barely moved, and his lips quivered like he was trying to speak but couldn't. The wind was cold, and the forest was quiet except for his faint groans. For a moment, I thought he was dead, and my heart nearly stopped. I was just a boy gathering firewood that night, trying to help my family prepare for a Christmas we could barely afford. My family, poor as we were, had hoped for something better, but it was clear that this year would be like the others. No gifts, no feast, just another day of survival. But everything changed when I saw Chief Amadi. That evening, the Harmattan wind made everything colder than usual. My hands were dry and cracked as I bent to gather sticks. Then I heard it, a groan so faint I almost missed it. I froze, thinking it might be a wild animal. But when it came again, I felt my chest tighten. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice trembling. No answer. Slowly, I followed the sound. When I saw him lying there, I panicked. His agbada was torn, and his face was pale. I didn't know who he was at first, but I knew he needed help. His lips moved, whispering something I couldn't hear. I wanted to run. I wanted to pretend I hadn't seen him, but something held me there. I knelt beside him, my hands shaking. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered, and he groaned softly. That was enough for me to act. I tore a piece of my old shirt and pressed it against the bleeding wound on his leg. "I'll get help," I promised, though I didn't know how. He didn't say anything, just looked at me with tired eyes. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, back toward my village. When I reached our compound, I shouted for my father, Ikin. He was sitting by the fire, repairing a broken fishing net. "Papa, someone is dying in the forest," I yelled, out of breath. He looked at me like I was mad. "Dying? Who?" he asked, dropping the net. I explained what I had seen, and without another word, he grabbed a lantern and followed me. My mother, Nina, stayed behind with my younger siblings, muttering prayers under her breath. Chief Amadi was barely conscious when we got back. My father lifted him onto his back without hesitation, even though he was heavy. "We can't leave him here," Papa said. I carried the lantern, lighting the way as we made the slow trek back to our house. When we got home, Mama laid out a raffia mat for him. We placed him down gently, and she quickly began boiling water to clean his wounds. I watched as she worked, my heart pounding. Who was this man? And why had someone hurt him so badly? That night, none of us slept. We took turns watching over him, scared he might die in our home. His breathing was shallow, but he was alive. Just before dawn, he opened his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." "Who are you?" my father asked. The man coughed, wincing in pain. "My name is Chief Amadi," he said weakly. My mother gasped. Even in our small village, everyone knew who Chief Amadi was, a wealthy businessman from the city. What was he doing here, bleeding and alone? As the sun rose, Chief Amadi told us his story in bits and pieces. He had been ambushed on his way home from a business meeting. My own partners, they sent assassins, he said, his voice breaking. "They want my company." We listened in silence, horrified. How could people be so wicked? My mother shook her head and whispered, "God will not let them succeed." Papa nodded, his face grim. Word spread quickly in the village. By midday, the village head had come to our house, bringing a local healer and a few strong men. They cleaned Chief Amadi's wounds and gave him herbal medicine to ease the pain. "Should we send for help from the city?" someone asked. The village head nodded. "Yes, but we must be careful. Whoever did this may still be looking for him." My stomach turned at the thought. One of the men offered to travel to the city to inform Chief Amadi's family. He left that evening on his bicycle, promising to return as soon as possible. Meanwhile, we kept Chief Amadi hidden in our home, afraid that his attackers might come looking for him. The village women brought food and blankets, even though most of them had little to spare. "This man must live," one of them said. "God will bless us for helping him." Over the next few days, Chief Amadi grew stronger. He began to talk more, asking questions about our family and our lives. When he learned how poor we were, he looked sad. "You've done so much for me," he said one evening. "I will not forget this." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was just glad he was alive. But little did I know, this Christmas was about to change my family's life forever. The man who had gone to the city finally returned, but his news brought tension. He had informed Chief Amadi's family and business associates, but he warned us to stay alert. Those who did this to him might be looking for him, he said. My father nodded, gripping his cutlass. Let them come, he said, though I could tell he was nervous. Mama started locking our compound gate at night, and the villagers kept a closer watch on who came in and out of the area. One evening, as the harmattan wind howled outside, Chief Amadi called me to sit by his side. Uche, he said, his voice steady but kind. You saved my life. Without you, I would be dead. I didn't know what to say. I only did what anyone would do, I mumbled. He shook his head. Not everyone would risk their safety for a stranger. You and your family didn't just save me. You gave me hope. When this is all over, I will make sure your family never struggles again. Christmas was just a few days away, but it didn't feel like it. The house was tense, with everyone on edge. We still had no money for a proper celebration, and my parents had accepted that we would have to make do with what we had. But Chief Amadi refused to let us despair. Christmas is about hope, he said one morning. And this year, hope has found its way into this house. His words stayed with me, though I didn't fully understand what he meant at the time. On Christmas Eve, a convoy of cars rolled into the village. The sound of engines broke the quiet morning, and people rushed out of their homes to see what was happening. My father and I stood at the gate, watching as a group of well-dressed men and armed security guards stepped out. Chief Amadi, one of the men shouted, running toward our house. It was clear they had come to take him home. As Chief Amadi prepared to leave, my mother packed a small bag of food for his journey. You are part of our family now, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He hugged her gently. And you are mine, he replied. Then he turned to me, placing his hand on my shoulder. Uche, I will never forget what you've done. This is not goodbye. I watched as the convoy drove off, my heart heavy. I didn't know if we would ever see him again. That evening, just as we were settling in for another quiet Christmas, we heard the sound of trucks pulling up outside our compound. My father rushed out, followed by me and my siblings. There, in the dim light, we saw men unloading bags of rice, cartons of food, new clothes, and even toys. Chief Amadi stepped out of one of the trucks, smiling broadly. I told you this Christmas would be special, he said. Our house transformed overnight. The smell of jollof rice, fried chicken, and pepper soup filled the air. My mother couldn't stop crying as she prepared the food, her hands trembling with gratitude. The entire village gathered in our compound to celebrate. For the first time, we had enough to eat and more to share. The children laughed and played with their new toys, while the adults sang and danced late into the night. As the celebration died down, Chief Amadi gathered my family. He handed my father a large envelope. This is for your family, he said. Inside was more money than we had ever seen in our lives. My father's hands shook as he opened it. We can't accept this, he said, his voice breaking. You can and you will, Chief Amadi insisted. Your kindness saved my life. This is just the beginning. That Christmas changed everything for us. With the money, my parents were able to repair our house, buy a small piece of land, and send me and my siblings to better schools. But more than the material things, it gave us hope. Chief Amadi kept his promise, visiting often and helping us whenever he could. He became a part of our lives, a reminder that even in the darkest times, miracles can happen. Thank you for watching. If you find this story interesting, please like, comment, and subscribe. Then turn on the notification bell to be the first to watch our latest videos. Remain blessed.